Jags plus 7.5 at the Eagles.
I just want nothing. You know how we feel about both of these coaches, these teams. Like there's value on that Jags number, but it's just like, I mean, I just think you kind of have a gambling problem if you're betting significant money on this game, I think.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Lines, a podcast purifying the sports betting industry and powered by Pinnacle. Remember to like, download, subscribe, drop us a comment. We want to hear from you. Reach out. I'm your host, Shane Mercer. We've got Andrew Pace, the founder of In Play Live, a community of like-minded sports bettors dedicated to long-term success. And on today's show, we'll get to the gridiron grind a little bit later towards the end of the show, because right now joining us is one of the main voices from American Bettors Voices. He's an elder statesman of the gambling industry who's been on all sides of the various businesses, from operator to regulator and everything in between. Richard Schuetz, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm doing well, and thank you for having me on Behind the Lines.
Oh, we're really jacked to have you here. I know you and Pace met at Bet Bash earlier this year. That's how he got that awesome shirt that he's wearing. Before we really get into things, though, Richard, I got to ask you, do you bet on sports? And what are you betting on these days?
Very little. When I
had a feeling.
During the Super Bowl, my girlfriend and I took advantage of every bonus in the planet. That caused me I've had a few problems with the sites, something about suspicious betting patterns. And I was convinced that it wasn't really suspicious. I was just better at math than they were. So no, I'm not a bettor.
Okay. All right. But you did go and harvest some bonuses. I love it.
I have two partners that make up for my short, probably two of the bigger bettors in the world, Spanky and Billy Walters.
You just casually throw around names like that. No big deal.
Yeah. Well, the three of us founded the American Bettors.
Yeah.
Office. Yeah.
Of course. So you don't need to do much betting. You kind of leave that to them and sort of represent their voices, so to speak, and the voices of a lot of us who are sort of on the sharp side of sports betting.
Yeah, and first of all, I've known Billy for over 40 years. I took his action at the Stardust, and one of the points that I've made on a number of occasions is that there's three realities about Billy. Is one, we let him bet limit bets at our book. Two, he beat us. Three, he was the most valuable customer we had. Because when you're in the business of managing risk, when you've got maybe the best sharp on the planet giving you insight, you're in a much better position to manage that risk. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with them at American Bettors Voices. The last time I saw you, Richard, you were participating in the Massachusetts Gaming Commission and kind of giving them an earful. This was back in September when they held a public meeting to dive into the practice of limiting sports bettors at the individual level. Give us your take on how that meeting went, that conversation, and where you think things are going.
I have the greatest amount of respect for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. And as an aside, I mean, I was working on my PhD a million years ago before your births. I wrote about the evolution of the Nevada gaming model, because Nevada was the first regulatory model there was. And so I did from 1945 to 66. And it was a great study. I mean, I had all these wiretaps and all kinds of just a data trove that was unbelievable. So I had an interest in regulation. And I really monitor agencies carefully. And I've really been a little bit startled with the rollout of sports betting. But one agency I think that has just really impressed me for a long time now, and I've written on it, is the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. They are really a competent group that wants to do the right thing. And this has all moved pretty quickly, and a lot of people don't know what they're doing. And I don't say that in disparaging. It's just the reality of the situation. And I would love it when a politician would come out and say, when are we going to open? They wouldn't say, well, for the Final Four, or, March Madness or the Super Bowl or something like that, a start of NFL season. I would like them to say when our regulators are ready. But politicians don't seem to be too willing to do that type of thing.
So, Richard, I have a question for you. You've been so heavily involved, instrumental, and a major piece of the regulatory side. What brings you to the player side of the table now, given all that experience? And have you released all of those sort of titles and positions as a result of it?
I was an operator for a long time, and I had the opportunity during that time to be involved running the casino at the Stardust back in the day when that meant something. The Stardust was the biggest book in the United States. We had 11 payphones on the outside wall, and they were the 11 highest revenue generating payphones in the United States. So much for the Wire Act working well. But so I've always been involved with betting, and then I got affiliated with Spanky. Spanky called me up and wanted, as you had done here, they wanted me on a podcast, and we kind of hit it off, and we stayed in touch. And then he talked about doing Bet Bash, which was at a bar in Jersey City for about 4 hours. And I'm in central Pennsylvania. So my girlfriend and I drove over to check it out. I met Spanky in person and whatnot. And then I've been to every Bet Bash, and he put me on his board of advisors or board of directors for the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame. And then I told him, I said, you've got a two-legged stool here and you need a third leg, and that's to generate something that represents the bettors, because the bettors have no voice whatsoever in what's going on now. The legislators don't ask. There's no voice to speak of. And it's bad because there's just, and there's things that I'm suspicious about, and that's why we're trying to help regulatory agencies ask the right questions.
You brought up, Spanky, obviously, and Billy Walters, and people are like, oh, they're just doing this to get down. Forget about that. That's all bullshit in my eyes. But
Right.
what is the benefit to the recreational player? So obviously, everyone at Bet Bash, they're either in that, 1%, if you can call it 1% of the winning players. Our listeners are in that 1%, or at least aspiring to be there. Let's say you're not in that 1%. Like, where does American Bettor's voice help the recreational player and be the voice of what they're looking for? And what are they looking for? I don't even know the answer to that question.
Well, one of the things we want to make sure the system makes sense, that they're not being intercepted by algorithms that are figuring out when they're most vulnerable to accept a bet and how they respond to propositions and things of that sort. We want to make sure the game is square. It's, that it's a fair game. And it'd be like sitting down at a blackjack game and they can pull the aces out, and out of the average player, they may not understand that that's a real disadvantage, and the sharps will immediately. The most valuable card for a player in the deck, almost regardless of the rules. But yeah, we just think that they need, if people are getting ripped off in buying cars, I care about that kind of stuff. And we just want them to get a square deal. And we want them to get a square deal because, again, it's critically important, in my opinion, for the sustainability of the industry. Because one, if you start busting out a lot of people, and you're already beginning to see some data trails that the calls to the problem gambling places are increasing and stuff like that, there's going to be a backlash to that.
Where do you see the sharp books playing a role in all of this then? Because if you're going to suggest that the soft books are going to be the ones who are writing the legislation, and they're the big lobby, and they're in cahoots with the regulators perhaps in some way. I mean, can't the sharp books then kind of do the same and maybe sort of play the same game?
Well, I think that, and I don't intend to endorse anybody. I mean, Joe's company, Prime Sports and Circa, is Snooker's a real book. I mean, they put up big numbers. They put them up early. They don't, and if they take a big bet, they move the number.
You brought up the Stardust. You brought up Billy Walters. You brought up Billy Walters beating you while you were at the Stardust. Do you ever think about maybe going back to that side of things, like on the operations side of things?
To do a sports book right is overwhelming exercise, and every weekend you are just buried in that, making sure you're if you're an originator and if you're dealing to sharp play, and it's just overwhelming.
So then what is next for you, Richard? I mean, I know that you've sort of been there and done that and you kind of done it all, but is it just representing bettors now with American Bettors Voice, or do you have anything else in the works?
Well, I really like writing. I've been doing a lot of writing about the industry, trying to cause people to understand where it came from. And, why regulation's important. I watched the men and women of the Nevada Gaming Control Board build an agency to keep the federal government out of Nevada, because the federal government was going to close it down because it was a bunch of mobsters, basically. And so they had to build a moat around that industry. They had to protect that industry. And the way they protected it was fairly rigorous regulation. I think that rigorous regulation has gone away. It's that concerns me. I mean, if you look at what happened at the MGM recently, and I know I have a little bit more of a Vegas bias than most of the people now because of my roots, but I mean, they had a situation out of control. They had a general manager of a casino assisting bookies to launder money. I mean, that's pretty amazing. The situation with resorts, you had Wynn in September paid $130 million forfeiture based on some really curious money transfers, mainly from the Orient, from Asia and countries and stuff like that. And I think we need to talk about these things. I think we need to talk about how do we improve terms and conditions. How do we improve the public understanding who's financing the changes that are taking place in the industry? I think that transparency is an incredible antiseptic, and I like to I'm read quite a bit in the United States. I'm a seemingly popular writer, and I also have a tendency to be more direct than most, because I mean, in a lot of your gaming journalism now, you have to worry about access, and you don't want to piss the operators off, and you want to get the guys to take your call. I don't give a shit. I mean, I don't think they can hurt me, and so I just want to build sustainable systems. And, I've seen a lot, and I think those experiences are valuable, because it's amazing how the same problems keep creeping up in the industry. And if you're not dealing with people of high character, honesty, and integrity, I think you just have some challenges. It's not going to end well.
Richard, I want to thank you for coming on our show to scream and yell about those things and sort of be that old man voice here. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing with American Bettors Voice, along with Spanky and Billy Walters, because, like you said, and I think Pace agrees, that work is desperately needed in this industry. And so I just want to applaud you for taking on that role, because someone with your experience has so much to offer in this space, and to sort of be on that side of things is really valuable for all of us bettors out here.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Anytime I can ever be of assistance, I'm at your service.
Wow. That's a guy we want in our corner, Pace.
100%.
All right, Richard. Thanks again. Really appreciate having you on.
Okay, Tom.
All right, time for our Grinding with Gosu segment, where we take a look at the gridiron matchups ahead for the week. John, We did it without you last week. We're glad to have you back, but Pace, I think we did all right last week without him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the whole crystal ball thing, and I think sometimes when you win a bunch of bets, then people will be like, oh, I'm going to bet it now this week, thinking that it just wins. But I think the whole idea with this kind of thing is like, there's theoretical value, and the fact that it's come through 2 weeks in a row for me on that is just a nice little bankroll boost. And this compared to live is really, it's really nothing. But yeah, I mean, hopefully some people tailed and had some fun with it.
Yeah, no, it was fun. All right, well, let's get to the slate ahead here. What are we looking at, guys?
So, John, college football. I mean, let's just get a high level like rankings and everything. Like, where are you at with what's going on as we head into week 10?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last week was pretty chalky across the board. I mean, almost every ranked favorite won against a non-ranked opponent and stuff like that. I think the only like upset was BYU was undefeated, ranked, and they were a dog at Central Florida, and they won pretty convincingly yet again. They always think it's funny when I look at the rankings and it's teams, like Vandy, for instance, my alma mater, they were 25th ranked, 18-point underdogs to Texas, lost by 3, dropped from the rankings. You overperform expectation in a game and you're dropped from the rankings is always confusing to me. But that's why it's just riders voting and none of that actually matters for the end of the year.
Yeah, and sometimes I think from a betting standpoint, for anyone that's looking at a game pregame and you feel like you have to take something because you think there's value, I think BYU kind of filled that sort of public perception of a team last week where you go, they're ranked, their opponent isn't, they're undefeated, their opponent has 4 losses. I just have to bet this pregame. I understand that rationale. In my experience with that kind of betting, when I do that, it's just like a guaranteed loss every single time. And the beauty of live betting is we all identified that game pregame. And then as soon as it starts, we're like, if BYU is playing well in this game, we're going to make some money off this game. And we absolutely crushed that first half because we were getting value on BYU as an underdog against a team that they were outperforming. So I guess my message to everyone for something like that is like, just watch the game and then see if your theory is coming into fruition. And then you can start betting on it. It doesn't mean that you're going to win then. It just means that you've gotten a little bit more information. And, in my experience, BYU is going to come out and just get thumped in that game and I'm going to lose money pregame because that's how I used to bet. So, John, what are you thinking for this week ahead? Obviously, we got a massive matchup with Ohio State playing Penn State. Ohio State's -4 on the road. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think this game should be a little bit closer to a pick. I think there's a little bit of a question mark with Drew Aller, Penn State quarterback. He came out of the Wisconsin game late and wasn't allowed to go back in. There's like a video of him crying when they tell him he can't go back in the game, or at least getting a little emotional. So, it could have just been, hey, we're playing Ohio State next week. We're up 2 scores. It's late. Like, what's the point? Like, let's just get there to next week. But maybe I think some people think maybe something happened to him. So just not a lot of clarity there. I do think that there's, like, from a matchup perspective, Ohio State has some advantages, particularly in their passing game on offense, but there are down 2 starting offensive linemen now, both lost for the season, one this past week, and they got pretty manhandled up front by Nebraska, who got manhandled the week before by Indiana. So just kind of an interesting matchup. I don't know that I'll really do too much. I don't like either of these coaches in big games, so I'll probably just kind of watch and enjoy it. And like you always preach, just take advantage of something live there.
Yeah, another good example was that Nebraska game. We really took advantage of that one. A lot of fun, obviously, betting that game. We did have some Nebraska money line, which didn't come through, but it was a great bet based on the price that we got. Okay, so, I mean, are you going to wager the Penn State matchup before the game starts?
No, I've already, in part of the futures that I gave out to the group before the season started, bet pretty heavily on Penn State to make the playoff before the season started. And I think we're just obviously way ahead in that bet. This is their last, real tough game that they have. Obviously, you can lose any game, and they've come close to losing some games that shouldn't have been close. But even if they lost this game, which, that was baked into the price of that. So just kind of rooting for Penn State there and in that way. And, just take advantage of something live. I mean, if I had to pick anything, I would like to lean under in this game. Both of these coaches are really conservative in close, tight games, just historically. So that just makes me think there's just going to be a lot of running the ball and not wanting to let their quarterbacks make mistakes.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next slate, we got Oregon playing Michigan, which I think at the start of this season probably would have been circled as one of the biggest of the season. Forget about Michigan for a second. Let's talk about Oregon, because I am the biggest non-believer in every team ever, unless they're named Georgia. I'm starting to believe. Where are you at?
Yeah, Oregon, they've done what they've done the last few years. They tend to really just stomp a lot of inferior opponents. That game last week, I mean, Illinois is maybe one of the worst. Like, I don't know what were they 6-1 and ranked in the top 20. Just one of the worst in recent memory from like a power rating standpoint. Like I actually made that game like Oregon minus 24.5, and I think that was pretty similar to what the line was pregame, but. Yeah, I mean, they've definitely been playing really well. I think they got like kind of a wake-up call against Boise earlier in the year, and they had some issues just kind of figuring some stuff out. Dylan Gabriel looked pretty bad, honestly, to start the year, and he's really rounded out. So they definitely look like one of the more complete teams, especially since Texas got pretty exposed by Georgia.
Would you lay 15 points on the road in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I would. I think Michigan's terrible. I wanted to bet Michigan to miss the playoff for the season, kind of chickened out because I just hate betting against these blue blood programs and what is essentially a beauty pageant where you're banking on media members and people to not kind of prop them up. That was just a mistake. Like this team's just not good. So yeah, I would lay it with Oregon.
So here's a really good example of something. BYU is an underdog this week. We just talked about BYU and how they came out against UCF. That was another game this past week, Illinois versus Oregon, where the first words out of my mouth when the game start was, I think there could be really good value on Illinois today. And then I think it was within maybe 5 minutes of play where we started laddering Oregon in the first half and won all of our bets. So just because I had that belief about BYU doesn't mean it's going to carry over, because my first thought with this Michigan game was, wow, there really could be value on Michigan in this game.
Yeah.
Maybe there will be.
Before you go on, I just got to jump in here and just say, as a casual, like I don't, follow college football the way you guys do. I'm a little more casual with it, but I enjoy watching that Oregon team play, and I'm coming around as just sort of a guy, who enjoys football, and more regularly, I'm like, oh, I want to watch these Ducks, and I actually want to bet on them a little bit too, some of the totals and that kind of thing. So I'm riding that I'm riding Ducks maybe to the end here.
Quack. Awesome stuff. Okay, and then moving on to the evening slate. There's a few games here that would be standouts, especially preseason that we would have looked at. I don't think we are going to talk about all these, but USC is playing Washington on paper before the season started. That would have been a massive game. I think no one gives a fuck about it now, so I think we can pass over that one. And then Pittsburgh's undefeated. They're plus 7.5 at SMU.
Yeah, this is an interesting game where I actually can't get to this number. I have it basically like SMU minus 3.5. Can't get across the 7, but SMU's taking a lot of money. I think people really don't believe in Pitt as a team. I think they think they're a little fraudulent like BYU, which I would definitely agree with, but I also don't think SMU is really. I think one of the reasons, as I called a lot of SMU futures before the season was just because of their schedule, but they're really not playing what to what the expectation was. So I think this is kind of just a battle of two pretty fraudulent teams with really good records here. So I will say there's a lot of trends that I have that favor SMU here. So I'm kind of torn. So again, it's probably just another stay away, though I do like the over because both of these teams are really good at getting explosive plays and giving up explosive plays. And there is what we call a havoc mismatch in the trench. So a lot of negative plays, forced turnovers, favoring the defenses. So I think you could see some short fields, huge plays, just kind of a chaotic game.
I'm just going to come out and say it. There could be good value on Pittsburgh Live. Because that's my gut for every time I see a line like that. I won't touch it pregame, but there could be value on Pittsburgh Live. But the thing is like 21 of their points this past week were defensive pick sixes, which is insane.
Yeah,
like that's absolutely insane. I don't know when the last time that happened.
I think two of them came really early too, didn't they? They were fast, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
they play extremely fast. They're like they run to the line, snap the ball. And SMU plays pretty quick too, from depending on what they're doing, how well they're playing on offense. I will say that Pitt and BYU are both like in the top 10 in terms of luck gained, or like wins gained from luck, or points gained from luck, the true luck metrics like fumble recoveries, missed field goals, muffed punts, things like that, in like recent history. So like top 10 in like the last 20 years when you look at these stats. So that's why people, when you analyze pregame and you try to model this stuff, you just have to dock points for the fact that they've simply won games by margins that they didn't deserve.
Love that. Points gained by luck.
Yeah. It's a factor, and we talk about it when we're live streaming all the time, where we go, "Hey guys, we have to remember that it's 10-0, and both of those scores were scored off of turnovers. It wasn't the offense that drove down the field, right?" And then there's other times where that happens, and then you still don't care, like the Detroit Lions this past week. Yeah, they were all kick returns, but it's like they're still the Lions. Let's see how they look when they get the ball on offense, and then kaboom, 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 right? So I said this last week. I'm going to say it again. I don't know if I've ever been more excited for an end of a college football season in my entire life. We were sitting here just a few years ago looking at, could they somehow get to the 2 seed to be in the Natty? And then that went to like 4 teams, and you're just trying to narrow down and just pray that FSU doesn't make it because they suck, but right. And now here we are, where we're looking at teams where you're going like, can Pittsburgh get in? Like, is there a path for them to make it work somehow? And then, teams like Bama that should have their season over, where you go, it's just not. So I'm super excited. But John, we're going to talk about this quite a bit, and I think about a month's time. This will be the single most irrelevant bowl season in the history of college football, because all the bowl games that quote unquote mattered in the era of 1 playing 2 in the national championship game, they mattered. Once we moved to the 4-team playoff, they stopped mattering as much. Now that we're in the 12-team format, so many games matter, where it's life and death, amazing playoff format, everything we could ever ask for in college football. But then the ones outside of that, we are going to have teams playing where it's their first bowl season in however many years. They haven't been in a bowl game. They care about it so much. They're going to play their heart and souls out in that game, versus a team who is just doesn't give 2 shits about that game. And I think it's going to be the most irrelevant bowl season of all time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those games tend to matter less and less for a lot of programs, like you said, and it only gets worse when you get it's like the NIT tournament in college basketball, right? It's like how many teams declined to go because they thought their season was hinging upon going to the actual tournament, and they feel like they're too good to go to this other tournament. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be like that with a lot of bowl games. So there's always so much value in finding the teams who actually care and want to be there, especially when they're matched up against one of those teams. I mean, we made a lot of money. I think I called like a full unit, maybe 2 units on Missouri pregame last year against Ohio State, because it was that exact
and you called live units as well. Yeah. I think when all was said and done, I think when all was said and done, you had a good like 3 or 4 units on that game
for me. I loved
it was
that
sweaty too. It was not like some cakewalk, but our predictions happened to come true for that one. Okay, John, over to the NFL. I'm just going to run through some teaser things really quickly, and you can dispute me on any of them. The rules that we've talked about in the previous weeks for teasers, I actually am going to use my heart to tell you to pass on some of them. So there's 3 games that stand out to me this week. I personally, when I have like a big favorite on the road, so the Jets being a really good example from last week, the Ravens being a really good example from last week, I just automatically stay away from those. So if I'm going to go from 7 down to 1 or 6 down to 0 on the road, it's just an automatic pass for me in the NFL. There's people that are so much better than me at this that might disagree. So the first game that I really like is teasing Houston up to 7. If you could somehow get 7.5 on the road to the Jets, that makes me like it that much more. Baltimore is getting way too much credit, and Denver isn't getting any credit. So I thought about teasing Denver up, but then I asked myself, why am I betting against Baltimore. You're never dead with plus 15.5, but again, I'm going to probably pass on that one. The Bengals suck, -8. Like, that's nuts to me. So again, I'm going to pass. And it really is, for me, the Bills teasing down to 0. I really like that one. The Patriots, on paper, might be the best teaser opportunity of the year, and I'm going to pass on it. I'm going to pass on it because I just can't do it. I just can't do it. John, I'm sure you're going to go there. So for me, the 3 games that end up standing out for me are going to be the Texans teased up to 7 on Thursday Night Football. The Bills teased down to -0.5 against the Dolphins. And there's a few others that I like, and this pains me to say this, but I think the last one is going to be the Eagles down to 1.5. John, let's do a quick rundown through the menu. Thursday Night Football, Houston +1 at the abysmal New York Jets.
Yeah, and no surprise, I think the Texans should be slight favorites here, though. When it's like a 1 on either side, it might as well just be a pick. I think it's just they're not really that worried about getting middled or anything. It's just an opportunity to juice some people on a money line. So I do like the Texans here. I don't like Stroud. Stroud's just not the same on the road. I know I say it every week. He's just not. But I do think that like teasing that side, I think is a pretty good bet. I think that total is like in the low 40s. So I actually back you on that one. I like that quite a bit.
Denver +9.5. They're 5-3. The public are starting to get hyped on them. I think this is a product of the sports books getting smoked by favorites winning in the previous 2 weeks, not this past week. Baltimore -9.5 at home. What do you think?
Yeah, so I can't get there on the number from a modeling perspective, but I just let me give you a rundown here. So Denver has 5 wins. Here's their opponents' records: 4-4, 2-6, 2-6, 2-6, and 1-7. So they have beaten 5 teams with a combined record of 11-29. Now, the 3 games they lost, they haven't lost by more than a touchdown. But I think the best team out of any of those they played was the Steelers. The Steelers aren't exactly at a high-powered offense capable of covering multiple touchdown spreads. So I think this is a good spot to buy on the Ravens here against and just sell this Denver team. I really just don't think they're very good at all.
Wow. The 9.5 to me is still just crazy. Yeah, great perspective. And again, I think my gut is telling me don't tease to 15.5 in that game. I don't think anything would surprise me, including Denver winning that game. But Okay, Raiders +8 at Cincinnati. If Cincinnati doesn't win this game, I mean, I don't know what to say.
I have this at 7. I think there's a little bit of early money on the Raiders kind of bringing that number down. I do think it is a good time to tease the Bengals. I just don't know that this Raiders team, this is to me a good spot to put the Bengals in a teaser and then also take like the +8 with the Raiders and try to hit that middle there. Because I think we've seen it. We saw it this past week. The Raiders were covering for all but 2 minutes of that game against the Chiefs, right? And then they still ended up covering at the end with the backdoor. So I think that's what I'll do there.
Patriots +3 with a total of 37.5 playing the Titans.
Yeah, I do. I mean, you said it. It's probably one of the best teaser spots of the year. I think the only thing with this game is that we don't know who's playing quarterback for either team because May got concussed in that game. And then it's, you've got Will Levis. Like, think about the circle of quarterbacks in this game. It's Drake, May, Jacoby Brissett, Mason Rudolph, Will Levis. I mean, this is like a bad preseason second half, is what this is.
And then you have to ask yourself the question of, does it matter who plays at quarterback as well?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it comes to that discussion.
Yeah, I really don't think it does. I mean, I'd be more comfortable with the teaser if Rudolph played and not Levis, because I think Levis has the potential to score a lot if he's on, but he also has the potential to score for the other team as well. But there's a little more variance with him, so I would just rather it Rudolph.
Right. So what's on paper, something really exciting, it turns out to be the old Walter White run. Saints -7 at the Panthers.
This number is hilarious. Is Derek Carr playing this week? Like, I guess I just don't understand how they can be favored by a touchdown. I think it's still Rattler or Haener. I know Rattler got benched, but I'm just going to take the Panthers.
The state, you just said it in the last game. The state of the quarterbacks in the NFL right now, it's like we're watching preseason football with some of these games. Like, the Saints running through these guys is unbelievable. It is bad.
Yeah.
Like, this team was 2-0. It is a fucking bad product that New Orleans Saints are putting out right now. And then on the other side of the ball, like, is Bryce Young going to start again?
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody knows. I don't know that I care. Why are the Saints? Why is Spencer Rattler laying a touchdown on the road to anybody?
Yeah. All right, Cowboys, 3-4 Cowboys +3 in Atlanta.
So I make this about Falcons -2. I don't really have much of a read on this game. It says, I think I should take the Cowboys. The Falcons just won a big divisional game. Cowboys lost a game that they probably should have lost anyway. Seems to me like a spot to take them especially with that number, but I just can't trust the Cowboys. I mean, I think they have all the talent in the world. They just seem that they can't put it together in a game.
Chargers -2 of the Browns.
I don't understand this line either. I think the Browns are still being priced like Deshaun Watson's a quarterback. Actually, I love this for a teaser spot. Like this total is like strangely high to me too for a Chargers game. I know it's Winston, but I mean, at +8.5 here you can get at some places on a teaser leg. So I just love that. I'll bet the Browns straight up too.
Wow. Okay. Commandos -3.5 at the Giants.
Yeah. This is such an interesting game. This game reminds me, it's not as big of a spread, but it reminds me of the Browns game from this past week, where it's a team that's leading in the division, like they're doing so well, and they're playing a divisional opponent who's just awful, struggling, and it's just a spot to lay an egg after like a roller coaster of a win with that Hail Mary in that game. So I hate the Giants, and they are on a short week because they're playing on Monday night, but I think you just have to take that +3.5 that's out there right now.
Also, a really good reminder. I believe this matchup was 21-19 the last time they played, and all of the 21 points from the Commandos were field goals.
Yeah.
7 field goals.
Wow. Yeah.
And the Giants lost their kicker, and they would have won this game, in my opinion, if they had their kicker, because of all the spots that turned into turnovers on downs, and they missed every 2-point conversion. So that game, it's actually the second game this year where the underdog has won because the favorite lost the kicker, the other one being the Niners against the Cardinals. So I think the Giants played a great game against the Commandos. I also think the Commandos have improved since then, where Jaden Daniels, like, he hadn't thrown a touchdown yet. I think it was week 2 and he hadn't even thrown a touchdown yet. Like, he looked good, but he couldn't finish the drives. I think he's a little bit more competent now. But again, we saw this past week with the Hail Mary, he essentially got beat in that game, and they were unable to finish in the red zone throughout the entire game. Jags +7.5 at the Eagles.
I just want nothing. You know how we feel about both of these coaches, these teams. Like there's value on that Jags number, but it's just like, I mean, I just think you kind of have a gambling problem if you're betting significant money.
What's the total in that one?
45.5, and it's the old Doug Peterson revenge game.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll probably put a small bet on the Jags just because I do bet what my model says a little small every week unless I have some competing force going against it. But this is not going to be a real bet at all for me.
And I've also teased the Eagles down earlier in this segment. So maybe you guys just erase that from your memory. It hurt to say when I said it, but I still stand by it. Bears +1 at the Cardinals.
I think this is another game where I have it Bears -1. I think the Bears are good. I think like they should have won that game against the Commanders. I think they play a lot of teams like close and well. Like they should have lost to the Titans week 1, but they've gotten a lot better since then. So I do like the Bears, but I also think the Cardinals are good. So that's just gonna be an interesting game to me. I think you can kind of find value on both teams live. If you're the kind of person who likes to try to get one team +7.5 and the other team +7.5, I think that could be a game for you. So.
Right.
Crazy to think that the
I think
Cardinals,
that's probably a good point.
Cardinals top of that division. That's nuts. I would never have predicted that.
That division.
That division's wide open, and the Cardinals have played 2 really good football games in a row after playing a couple of really bad ones. And let's not forget, they had the ball in week 1 driving to beat the Bills in an absolute shootout. And I think that some of the more high profile games where we've had our eyes on them a little bit more, they've looked so bad that people think they're worse than they are. But again, like you said, John, the Bears aren't that bad, and they have a good a really good defense. Rams +1 at the Seahawks.
Yeah, yet another game. I have the other team favored by 1 instead. So a couple things to say about this. I think this is a really good teaser spot for the Rams in a division game, even though it's on the road. I think it's just a good spot. Seattle's offense just hasn't really been that good. They tend to put up some yards, but they've just really struggled to actually capitalize and score in the last month or so. So it is the Rams outdoors. I like the under a lot in this game, just because it's Seattle, crowd's loud. Their offense hasn't been that great, and it's an indoor team going outdoors. But one thing I will say about this game is, and I said this I wasn't on the podcast last week, but I know I talked to you about this, taking the Rams to make the playoffs before that game last week, plus 590. You can still get plus 400 at some books. If they win this game, they have Miami and then New England after that. So they could very easily be 6-4, and then all of a sudden they're like minus 300 to make the playoffs.
I thought some of the craziest trade discussions were they're still at the top of the list. So they're talking about biggest moves heading into free agency, and Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford are at the top of the list. And I'm looking at it going, they're playing good football. They've got their team back. This is more or less the team that won the Super Bowl, like to an extent. I know Aaron Donald and some other key pieces are no longer there, but man, Lions minus 3.5 in Green Bay.
Yeah, so this is another one. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be, I think, for the Packers. So this line makes sense where it is for me right now. If this is Jordan Love, I think this game should be closer to a pick. If it's Willis, I think it'll end up being around like 4.5, 5.5. I don't think they're going to give people the 6. But it's I really like the Packers. I'm going to bet the Packers no matter what. So I took a little bit of the 3 and the 3.5, and I'm just going to add depending on whatever the situation is, hoping I can get that better number if it's Willis, because this is the Lions' first game outdoors this season. They have not been outside once yet, which is why we made that bet on the Lions to be the last undefeated team, which unfortunately, wouldn't be winning anyway because Kansas City is still undefeated. But I really like the Packers as a spot, no matter who the quarterback is, just both from a numbers perspective and that spot. And just like the Rams, I think this is a really good opportunity to take a future bet with that side if you like it. So you can get the Packers to win this division at plus 380 right now on a book. And if they win this game, they will be in first place in the division. So a wild number there if you like that side and you're primed for the upset like I am.
Okay, so I bit my tongue when you talked about betting Texas against Georgia. I'm not going to bite my tongue today. You could not pay me to bet on the Packers pregame in this one. So John, you're probably right.
More of my own.
I'm looking at this Lions minus 3.5 going, holy fuck. Here comes another blowout, and the Packers are going to get absolutely sat down in this one. And this is the beauty. One of us will be right. Okay. Colts plus 6 against the Vikings.
I don't agree with this number. I've never caught up to the Vikings from a handicapping standpoint. So I barely make it like Vikings under a field goal here. I think there's a lot of early money coming out on the Colts. I think it's the right side. The Vikings, to me, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times when we've been on streams talking about some of these teams, but these teams that really overperform once they hit that first loss, that first disappointment, I think sometimes some reality and some thinking back to the expectations of before kind of sets in. So I really expect sometimes for these teams to just fall off a lot based on the train that they were riding. So I'd have to see them kind of recover from a loss, win a couple more games in a row again before I just upgrade them into my modeling again. So I like the Colts in this side.
In our first segment, they've gone 1-2 since you said you bet a little bit on them to miss the playoffs.
I still like them to miss the playoffs. They're currently that's plus you can get plus 240, and I think it should be like plus 135, 140 right now. Right now, I have them as a 7 seed. I think you can need 10 wins to make the playoffs in the NFC this year. I think it's really tight in the NFC.
Shane, are you curling up in your
I'm just staying quiet over here. I don't want to hear any of this, but on I think John's on to something though. After that first loss, I wasn't surprised to see us go on the road and lose to the Rams. And it's such a tough division. The NFC North is the best division in the league right now.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think there's even a debate there. Bucks plus 8.5 Monday Night Football against the Chiefs.
We know what we're doing here, don't we? It's our guy. It's our Baker. Baker's our guy.
I looked at this and I thought, geez, the Chiefs are finally getting a lot of credit. I don't know.
Yeah. I think anything. I still make it Chiefs -8, but they tend to just not. Again, like I say it all the time, they tend to not cover these big spreads. I think they covered one earlier this year. I can't remember who they played, but then they just got backdoor. Like they weren't only covering for 2 minutes against the Raiders in that game, and still gave up the backdoor there. To, like with Baker in that offense, they lost Godwin, but I think they're just still primed to be able to get in that backdoor. So I really like that +8.5. I think it might go up. This might be a game where, closer to kick, the public might be chasing a little bit, really hammering the Chiefs. So they're going to have the Chiefs in every teaser imaginable this week. So I think that number might still get up close to 10. So I'm going to wait a little bit.
Awesome stuff. Well, I mean, it's been a crazy football season, both college and NFL, and I know we've had a lot of fun betting on all this stuff. A good reminder, guys, we bet live at In Play Live. It's just fun to run through the board. It gets us mentally prepared for the games. It gives you a little bit of a primer from the standpoint of, hey, this is what the line is pregame, and these are some things that we might be looking for. But when these games go wrong, we abandon them quickly, where they're either games we don't bet on at all, or we're going the other way. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, great reminder there. And another reminder for everybody out there, if you do want to act on any of this excellent knowledge that was shared by John and Pace here in college or the NFL, Pinnacle Sportsbook is the place to do it. You'll get the very best odds over there. And if you haven't signed up, you can go sign up at pinnacle.com/in-play-live. That's where you want to go click that link, sign up there if you're not signed up already. And Pinnacle, the place to bet all things pregame, in my opinion, especially if you're getting any kind of closing line value or anything like that. That's the place to do it, 100%. So head on over there and check that out. All right, guys, anything else from the Gridiron, or is that it? That's all. That's all she wrote for the week. All right, well, Pace, John, sports bettors from around the world. Till next week, keep beating those books. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join In Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.